Rachel, thanks so much for coming on and being willing to talk about your budget and your finances. We are super excited to have you here today.
Of course, I'm excited to be here.
So, can you tell me a little bit about your current budgeting scenario? Do you have one stream of income? Do you have multiple? What does budgeting look like for your family?
New, for
Okay.
starters. I did not, even understand what a budget really was until I started following you and got your budget template. Before, it was just kind of like winging it, so that's good. So we have multiple streams of income. My husband has a full-time job with a regular paycheck, and so his pay periods are what we go off of. I just started a full-time job that has a regular stream of income, and I only get paid once a month. I also do photography and freelance editing type of stuff, so that is very inconsistent and random. And then in the spring and summer, we rent out our RV. So that's another income source, but also a big expense. So I base the bulk of our budget around my husband's income because that's the most steady and consistent and has the actual pay periods.
And what schedule was that? Is it
He gets paid,
biweekly?
yeah, every other week.
Okay.
It's every other
Every
week.
other week. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So every other week is the schedule that your actual budget is built on, and then you kind of have several different incomes plotted into the pay periods where they would get paid, even though they're not a biweekly income, right?
exactly.
Perfect. Okay. And how long have you been setting up your expenses in the debt-free mom template?
I think I started in the fall, so probably September or October 23. Yeah.
Awesome. And you said that you've kind of been winging it before. Had you been like writing stuff down on, a pad of paper with a list of bills? What had winging it been prior to trying the template?
Many years ago, when we were just me and my husband, we sort of adopted what he would do when it was just him, which it took way too long to realize what was working for a young single man did not work for a family of four. So he would sort of calculate in his head how many days he had left until he got paid again versus how much he had in his bank account and what that meant he could spend every day. And then if he didn't spend any money one day, it like rolled over. But again, that was very few bills that, he had like rent and a cell probably and would just like buy food whenever. So really, really unfortunately, I just totally winging it, like checking. We have separate bank accounts, just sort of checking them, keeping tabs on them. All of our bills, fortunately, are auto pay. So that was helpful. What happened that led me to your budget template was we went kind of back and forth between like, should we be using credit cards? Should we be using debit cards? And over the years kind of flip-flopped and eventually got to this point where we were using our one credit card that was his, like he got it a long time ago. So he has really good credit established. He added me to it. We were using that to pay everything. And then he would pay it off every month. So it was like kind of not keeping track at all, basically, which got us in really, really, really bad trouble where things kind of got so bad that both of us were just ignoring it. And that was really unfortunate. So when I started like looking at things and kind of taking it over from him, which is a sore subject, it was like, oh my gosh, this is really, really terrible. And we were in really, really, really severe credit card debt because it got to a point where we couldn't pay off every month. And so it just kept building. Fortunately, brother and sister-in-law, my sister-in-law had some really bad financial issues growing up and with her parents. And so she like did everything she could to make sure that she's very financially smart and financially aware. And so she kind of like sat me down and was like, how bad is it really? And I had to like say a number. And it was really bad. And she was like, almost had a panic attack herself, hearing how much credit card debt we were in. And they are really good with money and really, really, really nice to us. So they paid off our credit card debt, and we are paying like a personal loan to them. So we don't have because it was the interest
Right,
was just
right.
destroying us, like hundreds of dollars of interest every month. Oh God. Like, and just so we got that from them in December. And just in the past few months, like all of a sudden, our income versus expenses. I mean, granted, I got a job also, so that helped. But it's amazing not having that interest, like what it did. It's crazy. I was like, oh my gosh, we're not underwater anymore. And it's only been a couple of months. So, given the times and everything, I am so aware how fortunate we are. I mean, we were already looking at like we should do a personal loan, like USAA, because my dad was in the military. So we were already kind of looking at we should do a personal loan to pay it all off. So it was already something that was in the works. But obviously, through my brother and sister in law, they had to charge us interest because in order for it to be a loan that and not like be taxed or anything like that on there. But it's a very low interest rate that they're charging.
Yeah,
It's
it's so true that it's the interest that just slams you because even if you grow the gap between your income and expenses and start putting a ton of extra towards that bill every month to try to chip it away, it's like you're like, "Okay, great. We can put 1,000 towards the credit card this month, so we're gonna really whittle this down." So much of it ends up going to interest that the actual
Mhm.
principal is, like, barely moving the needle.
Yeah,
And that's really the yeah, like you said, that's the unfortunate side of that credit card is a lot of times we don't even realize the way that that compound interest math works until it's actually happening to us.
that when my sister-in-law explained it to me, because that was like what got her. She was like, "I refuse to pay interest on anything." She's like, "I hate the idea of paying money to people, like, for no reason, basically." And she explained it to me, and I was like, "Oh,
Mm,
what?" Like, I had no
mhm.
idea. I did not get a good financial education growing
And that's
up.
so common. I mean, that is not unique to you or, you were not, like, in the dark and everybody else was aware. It's like, unfortunately, it's, like, normal to not be aware of how that works.
Yes, and I think in general, like, a generational thing for sure, but I know with my parents, because they grew up not having a lot of things, they didn't want us to not have things or whatever it was. So, like a college education, it was like, you're getting a college education to go big, but even just like, you know, they didn't want us to not have things. They wanted to get everything that they didn't have. So they didn't really like teach us. It was just like, here, we're going to do what we have to do to make sure that you get what you want.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
So,
which is really fun when you're a kid and then really hard when you're an adult, right?
yeah, exactly.
So now you're in a point that even like 6 months ago is a completely different scenario, right? Like compared to then versus now, both with having a budget that you're following along with and with having the personal loan so that you can pay off and actually make payments towards principal instead of only towards interest. So now, what's the big question that you have or the scenario or the situation that you would like to talk to me today about while you're, getting hold of that budget and coming up with those habits and routines for your family.
Yes. So it feels like we're still not good at pacing ourselves through the budget. So a perfect example is because I'm being paid now once a month, my paycheck is a pretty decent size, not amazing, working as an assistant in a school. So it's not making the big bucks, but I got paid and all of a sudden had this like big number in my account that I have not seen in a long time. And it was like, oh, we have money. We can go, like, I can get some new clothes. We can do this. We can like buy all these things, but without looking ahead and remembering, like, oh, but wait, that money needs to cover our car payment, which is, halfway through the month. And I'm not going to, at least for me, like, I won't get another paycheck before then. Or like my husband got a bonus in March for his work. Like, that's their bonus schedule. So all of a sudden he got a regular paycheck and then like a second paycheck. Like, yay. We had been doing so well not going out to dinner or only ordering pizza in every other Friday. And all of a sudden, I've noticed we're like going out to dinner again all the time and all this stuff. And so it's like we see money and we get really excited and can't contain ourselves to remember, like, no, wait, you still have to save that. And again, your budget template has been amazing because now I can look ahead like 6 pay periods and see that was my thing when I first got it. And I was like, oh my God, like, yeah, we have money in our account now, but if you look ahead 6 pay periods, like to after Christmas, gonna be in the red by this much. And the only reason we were not really in the red was because it was all going on a credit card. So shout out to people to remember it, like the budget doesn't work with credit cards unless you're like we were using debit cards and credit cards and like the combination. So it was not accurate at all first few months. So now we are only using that's one of the clauses in my loan with my brother and sister-in-law that we're not allowed to use our credit
Okay,
cards.
that's a good one.
Which is very good, yes. So now it's much more accurate. On pay period day or payday, we get really excited, and it's, "Hey, we can go on Amazon, and we can buy this, and we can buy that," but then it's like, "Oh, wait, nope."
So, one thing that is a hard transition to make when you're going from kind of a willy nilly approach to your finances to a budget that is more specific is to shift your focus from what does the checking account say to what does the budget say. And that's kind of what I think you're describing is that when you're focusing on what is the bank account balance, it's telling a different story than what your budget might tell. And so that's one of the keys to success in fully making that transition over is to actually ignore the bank account balance because it actually can't tell you very accurate information. It's a tiny snippet in time. If you think about your bank account, it's constantly having money flow in and out, so the balance is going up and down sometimes multiple times a day. So if we happen to log in and look at it, we're looking at is a tiny snapshot in time. So if we're looking at that bank account balance and we picture it kind of like a roller coaster, if it goes up when we make a deposit and it goes down when we make a withdrawal or pay for something, all we did was take a picture at it and look at where it happened to be at that moment in time, but it doesn't tell us a story. It doesn't give us information about what can be available in the future. But a budget can do that for us. So what we have to do, and it's easier said than done, but what we want to transition is that same amount of time and value that we give to looking at the bank account just needs to shift our gaze towards the budget. When we have the impulse to open our bank app and look at it and say, I wonder if we could go out to dinner tonight. Let me look at how much we have. The thing we need to open is the budget, not the bank account. And we can get that information from the budget. So it's not like, oh, ignore all of the numbers and just go with your heart and whatever you feel like doing. It's just that the source of that answer, the source of that information actually lies in the budget instead of in the bank account. So, for example, if we think about a budget by pay period where the pay period has started, and so now we're at the beginning of the pay period, our bank account will say that it has several $1,000s in it. And so that gives us the feeling that we have all this extra available to us. But the bank account can't tell us what is about to come out, right? It doesn't know that yet. We're only looking at the past tense if we look at the bank account. But if we look at the budget is going to tell us future tense of what is going to be available. And so if I open my budget and my bank account and have them side by side on, let's say, day 3 of the pay period, the bank account is going to say $4,000 and the budget is going to say, after everything that you have planned, you have a budget buffer of $200 or something. So, like I said, right now, I think looking at them side by side is a really helpful exercise because it starts to tell us this is a snapshot in time in the bank account and the budget is the full story, the full picture. So, when we look at them side by side and we see a discrepancy between how much we think is available in the bank account versus what the budget tells us, we can kind of start to retrain our brain that one of them is helpful information and one of them is not actually very helpful information. As far as oh, we want to do these kind of things because it's the beginning of the pay period, I would encourage you to just start adding those things into the budget. One thing that kind of happens when we're writing a budget, when we're planning it out before the pay period starts, we're like, oh, I got to be laser focused on our goals, and anything that's extra needs to go to pay off this personal loan. And so we really restrict how much we're willing to spend when we're planning. But then we shift into actually using the budget, and we're not so gung ho about all the goals. We're kind of wanting to do a few other things. So I think in the long run, we actually end up being more successful with our goals if we add back some of those things into the budget. So, like you said, well, we really want to go out to dinner. And then that spiraled into going out to dinner a lot. If we add back in one more dinner out per pay period into the budget so that it's on plan and you don't have to figure out, okay, what part of the pay period am I going to take away from and adjust in order to go out? If we actually make it part of the plan, I think on the whole, you would probably find that you end up spending less on eating out by adding it into the budget than you do by keeping it out of the budget and then adding it in after the fact. So, those are the 2 big pieces that I see could use a little bit of tweaking in order to feel more flexible in your budget, is to 1, train your brain that the budget can give you helpful information and the checking account can't. And then number 2, what are those things that we do value, we do find enjoyable, and we want to keep in the budget while paying off our debt, and just go ahead and preemptively actually add them in so that you're not trying to retroactively find a spot for them later. Like, for example, if your next 4 pay periods includes no eating out, but if you look back at your past 4 pay periods, what actually happened was that you ate out 3 or 4 times per pay period. That means that we have a mismatch between what we think is gonna happen and what's actually gonna happen. So we wanna actually shift towards making the budget that's coming up look more like what's actually going to happen. Do you have so for some of those things, do you currently have a budget for things like you said, like the Amazon purchases, like personal spending cash or eating out or home supplies? Do you have those things represented in your budget?
Yes. So I think that is completely accurate. And I think one of the problems we were facing is that because our expenses were so high and our income was not so low. Our income is high too, but our expenses are so high. I was trying and we didn't have anywhere that we could cut out in terms of like our fixed expenses. I will tell you right off the bat, big truck, your assessment completely accurate. We have a big truck. We also have a big RV. They're both very expensive. Yep, completely true. Although we do use the truck to pull the RV, and the truck is paid off in like 2 months, which is so exciting. But those things have huge, huge payments. So I think I was trying to like really squeeze our belt in our variable expenses, which is like what you have to do when you're trying to save. But I think another issue at hand is like getting my husband on board with the budgeting, which is really tricky. And he's got this mentality like, I make a good amount of money. I should be able to enjoy these things and be going out to dinner and doing activities. But then it was like, that is accurate, but we have really huge expenses and we got ourselves into credit card debt. So I think I was trying to make our budget end with a positive. I think there was a miscommunication. My sister-in-law made this comment about how they like survived spending like $200 a month on groceries for a family of 4 when they were.
I was gonna say like in 1995.
Yeah, I mean, groceries have gone up a lot, but that also just feels really impossible. So yeah, so it would look really bad. Like I'd have our grocery budget at like 200, but even per pay period, that was really hard with a family of 4 to get our groceries under 200. And I had like our, yeah, I had them all really low, but I actually just said I I take screenshots of the expenses down at the bottom at the end of every pay period and send them to my husband because he's not good at going in and actually looking himself. So I send them to him to kind of be like, hey, like, here's where this pay period was. And I was saying it's nice because we're finally at this point where I can be moving our budgeted numbers back up, or realistic numbers, while still keeping us within budget. So it won't feel so bad when we don't make them.
So
So yeah.
let's talk a little bit about motivating a less than willing spouse, because that is a huge thing that comes up a lot. So it sounds like you are the more intrinsically motivated, like the idea of paying off debt is enough of an incentive to you to shift your spending and to focus on the budget. For someone who is less intrinsically motivated that way, who actually needs an external motivator and is not just like, "Oh, the mere fact that we're paying off debt is exciting to me." What we want to do is to become a student of that person and to say, what is that external motivator? Because everybody is going to have totally different definitions of both independence and incentive, which are the two things that every adult needs in the budget. Every adult needs some version of independence where they can spend without asking permission. And then they also need incentive, where something that lights a fire on them, something that is attractive or motivating to them, is represented in the overall plan. And unfortunately, opposites attract. So we tend to have two people who have very different definitions of both of those things trying to look at one overall financial picture. And so that creates a lot of situations of butting heads. And it's just super, super common. And what happens is when we can start to try to communicate about what our own definition of independence and incentive is, and then ask the other person what theirs is, we often learn a lot of things about each other where we become more okay with the compromise that is just necessary for budgeting. Where if we don't first take those conversations, sometimes we're both coming at it with good intentions, right? It's not like he wants to get your family into a financial hole and you're trying to dig yourself out. I think you both are trying to arrive at a similar place. It's just the method in which you're gonna get there is very different. So, in those scenarios, and I will say also that I am the husband in our budgeting. I'm the one who is more like, let's just go spend it and we have it available, and I don't think as well about the future and the long-term stuff, and I do have to actually externally motivate myself. I often get iced coffee when I have to do something. So I can relate to what he is describing. So some of the things that can help are to say, as the person who's budgeting, to sit down with the person who's not the primary budgeter and just say, what are the things that you wish we could do with our money that you feel like we can't do right now? And so that could be trip somewhere, or it could be a home update, or it could be, he has the truck and he has the RV, but he wants the jet ski, or, whatever those things are. Actually writing down what that is and then saying, okay, let's work that into our plan. Let's figure out where in the process it would make the most sense to add that in. So, what that could look like is we cannot buy a I'm just gonna go with the jet ski example. I have no idea if that's, whatever, but we cannot buy a jet ski right now. If we paid off this personal loan, it would take us 6 months to save up enough to buy the jet ski. So, paying off the personal loan is the door through which we have to walk to buy the jet ski. And that tends to at least intrigue someone who is more externally motivated, because what you're asking them is not just, what do you want? What do you like to do? I like to go out. It's, what's the big thing that feels impossible and how can we make it possible? And when we start to talk along those lines, you get the ears perking up of the person who is like, I hate budgeting. I don't like to do that. It's too restrictive. I want my life to feel more free. Or like you said, I make too much money to say no to myself about something as small as eating out. But when we pivot it and we say, you make so much money that if we pay this loan off, you could buy that thing, then they're like, "Oh, yeah, I do." And so then it starts to feel like a means to an end instead of just an overall restriction that doesn't feel like it has an end. And I think that's the big thing too, is for someone who is more of a spender and less of a budgeter, they feel like the plan that their spouse is trying to put them on is indefinite. that once we go on that, this is what my life is going to look like forever. But when we can create milestones or benchmarks, I think what you said is totally right. We did get ourselves into this hole. We got into this credit card debt and we need to get out of it. But here are all the things that are available to us as soon as we pay that off. It gives that light at the end of the tunnel. So they see there is a hard stop on when we can stop making some of those changes. And that always feels better than something that is indefinite. So, does any of that sound like it might be a conversation that he would be a little bit more enthusiastic about?
Very much. I feel like there's a lot at play. There's like the fact that I kind of took over the budget for him from him. Like it was always, oh, Jared takes care of our money. Like he's in charge of that. He does that. So I think there's like a little bit of that. Like he was in charge of the finances and now I've taken over and now I'm telling him what to do. So I feel like it's sort of one more thing that I'm telling him what to do. Like I'm in charge of the parenting, like in general, and I know more about that. But then he was always the finances, but now I've taken that over and I feel like emasculating is the word. So I think that's like a huge part of it. But I think that that type of conversation could really help because taking trips and traveling is something we always talk about wanting to do, but we've never save up for anything. We look and it's like, okay, I have this money in the checking account right now. I can afford a plane ticket somewhere. But it's like, nope, that money is needed to pay for something in 2 weeks. And I actually think for both of us, because we actually are very similar in respect, we both are like, let's spend it. And I just got terrified and realized something had to be done.
Yeah,
So
you
I've,
had your big light bulb moment maybe
y-
before he did.
yeah. And I think there are plenty of things that would be incentives for him to do things like that. And again, yeah, it's kind of like me saying we can't be going out to dinner as much. I can definitely understand why to him that feels like we can never go out to dinner again, as opposed to like during this particular phase while we are trying to get out from under these loans, we need to cut back. And then, I mean, for us, it's like my younger son is going to kindergarten next year, so we won't have his preschool payment anymore. We're paying off the truck in a couple of months. So it's like we do have a light at the end. I know that that's very lucky. So those will be good conversations. And I like that. For example, our 10-year wedding anniversary is in August, and he wants to go on some big trip, just the two of us. It's not that far away, and we haven't even started saving anything for it. But it's like, I feel like that'll be a good conversation to be like, for both of us, okay, so when we don't have the truck payment anymore, that doesn't mean all of a sudden we should be spending $600 more a month on random little Amazon purchases and eating out more often. We should be taking that and saving it, not even putting it back into our budget toward everyday things, like immediately putting it in the budget as like saving for a trip. He's also very logical. So I feel like that type of thing will well for him.
And getting really specific is always better than being really general. So instead
Mhm.
of just being like, our life will feel better when we pay off this loan. Say, we will go to Hawaii when we pay off this loan. And there's just a big difference between those two things, right? And so,
Yeah.
whatever that trip is whatever you want that to look like, wherever you want to go, I think deciding that together so that you can get on the same page about something, even if you don't feel on
Mhm.
the same page about some of the day to day expenses or what the budget looks like. When you have something that you are on the same page about, it can really help
Mhm.
to cut down on those little money spats that are like, we're not having an all out blowout battle, but we're also kind of rolling our eyes when one person buys something that the other person wouldn't buy, which goes both directions. When we have a commonality of this is the thing that we both want, I say, like, print a picture out of that and put it on the fridge. Like, have some
Mhm.
visual where you're like, hey, in that moment where I really want to order dinner out, even though I have meat defrosted in the fridge and it would take 20 minutes to put it on the table, then I have this clear visual of, oh, yeah, this is why I'm doing it. because it can start to be a fun challenge between the two of you almost of like, hey, remember, we want to go there. So this is what we're going to do, right? Because each of you are going to have
Yeah.
those moments of weakness where you want to do something off plan or whatever it is. If you have a common purpose, then that's the thing that you can both point to. And another thing you brought up is really common too of the person that isn't the one managing the budget feels like they're constantly being told what to do. And it's not because you're telling him what to do, it's just because he isn't aware of the budget, so somebody has to point him to that, and so it feels like being told what to do. So, it can help with that feeling as well, if you're not just telling him what to do for no reason, if you're actually just reminding him like, "Hey, remember we had a conversation and this is what we both wanted. This is what we both wanted to do, and so we're gonna stick to that because we'll both be so happy when we get to go on that trip." And that can just, again, make it feel less like he's being bossed around and more like he's being reminded of the goal that he agreed to, not that someone else imposed upon him.
Mhm.
It is hard, I think especially for someone who used to manage the finances and then no longer does, there can also be this sore spot of the situation we're in is my fault or something, like I was the budgeter at the time. And so they are very sensitive to anything that feels negative because it's a reflection on them. And so having consistent reminders from you of we're on the same team. We both got into that credit card debt together and we're going to get out of it together is a really helpful reminder. And that might need to be a daily reminder for a while of we both got into it. We're both going to get out of it because he might have that internal narrative of it was my fault. And so Rachel had to take over. And like you said, that emasculating feeling of I couldn't do it. And so my wife had to take over. And that's really embarrassing. And so I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to look at it. So having those positive reminders of this is what we did and we can't change the past, but we have a really exciting financial future in front of us can make him more willing to say like, "Okay, I'll take a peek at that budget because that sounds cool."
Yes, that's I feel like you have a camera in my house. That is so accurate, everything you described.
Yeah, and it is hard. I mean, I really wanna validate how both of you feel of, like, that is a perfectly normal reaction to everything that happened, right? And so it's not like, it's not like he's so beyond help with the finances that we need to, like, "Oh, don't talk to him about the budget, just do it yourself." I think there are ways to kind of right the ship, so to speak, to say, like, just because that happened in the past does not mean it's gonna be repeated if you start looking at the budget more again or something. Some of those life lessons are so big and so hard to walk through that we really only need to go through them once. And we're like, that was enough. That was awful. And this is the path that we're on now. And we know what the alternative is like, and we're not going to go there. So I think it is super exciting too that you, like you said, you have the job, you're about to pay off the truck. The preschool payment is going away. Some of those things, just by the nature of not being the one who's budgeting, those might also be things that you need to remind him. If you could say once a month, hey, I want to show you something about the budget that's really exciting. Because a lot of times, what also happens is the person who is not budgeting either gets radio silence about money or is told something they did wrong. And so they're not hearing positive reinforcement about something. And so if he expects to have you say, hey, I want to talk about the budget, which is like AKA you overspent. If you say, hey, I want to talk to you about the budget, I think we could actually do that trip a month earlier. Those kind of things will rewire him to say, ooh, it's really fun when Rachel wants to talk to me about the budget instead of like, oh, another thing I'm not supposed to do. And because you do have those things that are on the horizon in a very short amount of time that are really exciting, like actually using those as conversation sparks to be like, okay, that $600 payment is going to go away in June. Let's decide how to leverage that into a really good outcome. And then a couple months later, the preschool payment is going to go away. Let's decide together what that looks like to use that for our financial future. So that again, just those conversations, he starts to have actual experiences, recent experiences of very positive conversations about a budget. And so then each time we do that, the next one is going to get a little bit easier.
I'll take like the screenshots and send him the expenses because I know that he's not going in and looking at the budget. So for me, it's like I was just sending it to him saying, hey, here's what our grocery budget was, here's what we spent in gas, like, etc. But I knew every time I hit send that he was interpreting it as me scolding him, like, what you spent at Starbucks. So when I sent him this past pay period and I like added that comment, like, it's really nice because I've finally been able to like bump our numbers, our budgeted numbers back up. So even though we're spending basically the same amount, it looks much nicer in our budget now. So I feel like that if I can keep like instead of just like an empty mail do screenshot, like say something like, look how great this is.
Because the reality is that it's not always gonna be a great screenshot, right? There's gonna be times where it was overspending or whatever. So even in those moments, it can be about something you learned instead of something that you guys need to do differently. So it could be, we've had 2 pay periods where our grocery, expenses were higher than what I budgeted for. I've learned that I need to bump the budget up $20 or whatever. And so it can still be, "This didn't go well," but the focus can be on improving the budget. And so even if there are things that were overspent, it can be a chance to remind yourselves like, okay, the more we spend on random unbudgeted stuff, the less we're going to be able to spend on that trip. We had, 2 pay periods ago, it went really well and we were able to put $400 towards the trip. Last pay period, we only did 200. Let's try to do 300 this pay period or something. So it's always a focus on positive outcomes for the future, even if part of the conversation needs to include what didn't go well. It's just that we don't want to land on this didn't go well and then can just kind of look at him to have a response because the response is just going to be like, I hate this. And so and some of that, I think you said, are you a special education teacher's assistant, right? So I'm a former special education teacher. Some of that is from that training of like, how do we take a highly frustrated person who really does need to learn this and figure out not what makes most people tick, but figure out what makes this one person tick. And once we find that, you really do unlock a whole new person, a totally different response to what you're trying to get out of them, and a totally different, like, I haven't been a teacher for 9 years, and I have clear pictures in my mind of the times that you see the enthusiasm in their eyes, where they go from just so frustrated and uninterested, "Don't teach me that thing, I don't wanna do it," and acting out in all kinds of ways to avoid doing it, to all of a sudden, how are you even the same kid? How are you so excited about this? And it's when we find the thing that that one kid needed in order to flip the switch. And so the same thing is true of all of us as adults. And when we find the thing that makes us tick and when we find the thing that makes our spouse tick, and they're going to be two different things, when we find those and put them into our overall financial picture, it's just a different world. It's a different experience. And so having the conversations always be positive and future focused, even when they need to include something that didn't go well, can really start to guide someone who had a not so great experience in the past with the idea of budgeting. Do you have any other questions or things that you want to talk about while we're on together?
I have 2. First, I have ADHD, so I've been like trying so hard to keep these in my head, like not lose them. I'm like, don't lose them, don't lose
Relatable.
them. So the first one is just like huge, huge shout out to you in terms of talking to about budgeting and talking about how like the goal is to increase the gap and there are 2 ways to do it, the like lowering your expenses or increasing your income, because I feel like everyone always talks about lowering your expenses because obviously a lot of times increasing your income can be a lot harder. But I have been a stay-at-home mom for the past 3 years and doing just kind of like freelance work, very casual, random income. And that was one of the things that, like, when we sat down and looked at it, it was like, okay, there's nowhere else we can decrease our expenses. It was like, we have a rent payment, we have an RV payment, we have a truck payment, we have a car payment. Like, these things are not going away. And, like, we got rid of a bunch of subscriptions to TV shows, whatever, which is helpful, but still only like $15 a month here and there. And so it was like, we have to increase our income. Fortunately, we're in a position where we can because I get a job. But it was like, it was just a totally different way of looking at it. Like, feel like if I hadn't heard you say that, I would have just been stressing out about like, how can we decrease our expenses? Like, there's no way to do it. But like, no, there's another way. I have to get a job. And again, I know how very fortunate we are that like my husband works from home. So when my son is done with preschool, he can watch him. So we don't have like childcare expenses on it. And like, I was able to get a job. But it was just so helpful to have that other way of like, oh, there's a second way to do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah,
Like, we don't stress.
it's that flexible thinking. A lot of times we can pigeonhole our own mind into these are the only options I have, and I have no secret knowledge. I have no special gift in this. It's simply that I'm not in the situation that you're in, so I'm able to kind of have an outside perspective basically. Because I can think of moments, especially parenting is a big one for me, where I'm like, "Okay, these are the 2 choices, A or B, and neither of them are working for me." And then it takes some outside person who's maybe a little bit further along in parenting or something that's like, "Hey, you can actually do this option C." And you all have, like you're like, "Duh, like why didn't I think of that?" But it's not that it was like a big secret or anything. It's just that somebody a little more removed from the scenario can offer that. Because a lot of times like we do see our income or where we live or even the career we're in or even the car we drive as an immovable thing. We can't shift it. Like that is a set thing. And so then, like you said, we look at something like, well, I could cancel the subscriptions and I could eat out a little less. But other than that, what am I supposed to do? And it's like, well, the other stuff is also changeable, but we kind of treat it as concrete that it can't be moved. Like we work here and we can't work anywhere else, or, like those kind of things. And when we can have the flexible thinking of at least being willing to consider, right? Like it's not, I think when I say that, a lot of red flags go up, like she's saying that we need to move and sell our car and, all that stuff. It's just the willingness to even consider it as an option is usually gonna end up leading to some alternative option that you maybe hadn't been thinking about before. So I love that you were willing to think along those lines because not everybody is willing to go there, so to say, in terms of I'm willing to get a job or I'm willing to make some of those bigger changes. And those bigger changes can be temporary too. I mean, if you look at your finances and you say, "Hey, when we get X, Y, and Z paid off, I don't even have to work full time anymore." Like those things can be they can be really temporary but have a very high impact.
Mhm. Well, and also for me, we live like way, way out in the suburbs. And my background, like I said, what is in film editing. There are no film editing jobs out here. So I was looking at jobs like in the city, which would have been an hour commute. And that would have been extremely unplausible. Not ideal. Like I would have been in the car all day, never seen my sons, blah, blah, blah. But then all of a sudden it was kind of like, I mean, I could go work at my son's school. So it's like not in my field of expertise, but they're desperate for people and they were hiring. And now it's like, not only am I working, but I'm working the same hours. So I get home and I can still make dinner. I'm getting a paycheck and I have summer off. So it's like, it was not, it was kind of like, I have to increase my income, but these film jobs are not working. And it was like, well, what about this? It's like, it's not as high paying, but the hours are significantly better.
And if you take that high income and you subtract the cost of commuting and the cost of you probably would need to increase your eating out or you would need to buy a different wardrobe or you would need extended care at school or something like that. If you take those expenses and subtract them, you're like, oh, actually the job from home that has a lower paycheck actually net profits more.
Yep. And also just like happiness
Yeah.
factor.
Which is, like, why do we ignore that in our decision making? Like, the joy of being at your child's school and getting to pass them in the hallway, like, those have real concrete value in the same and even way more than what money
Mhm.
does.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
you
have
said you
one
had 2
more.
things. Do you have
Yes,
okay.
I do. And this is sort of out of left field, but I also do this photography and film editing work on the side, and I get paid through PayPal.
Mm.
But I try to keep some of my money in PayPal for tax purposes and like just so that I don't know I have it. And I saw the other day that there's like a high yield savings account through PayPal. Do you know anything about that?
So I don't know anything about it through PayPal specifically, but 2 things. I would recommend putting it into high yield savings because you can earn a decent amount. And as long as it's a high yield savings account that's an actual FDIC insured bank account, that would be fine because it's going to function the same way as Chase, Ally, Capital One, JP Morgan, anything like that. If they call it high yield but it's actually like inside of your PayPal account, PayPal itself in the same way, it's exactly the same as like Venmo or Cash App. Those are not insured. So like that money could disappear and they're not really on the line for it. So the habit of setting money aside towards your taxes is perfect, and wanting to put it into a high yield savings account is awesome. I would just make sure that it's an actual FDIC insured bank account as opposed to something that they're maybe trying to act like is similar but is not actually covered if something were to happen. Well, this was phenomenal. I have questions all the time about unwilling spouses. I also see not only just questions, but sometimes excuses like, "Oh, we can't budget because my husband doesn't want to." And so I think this conversation is ideal for those scenarios too of you can figure out ways to motivate someone who's less than willing and get ahead. So first of all, thanks for being willing to come on at all. But second, being willing to be transparent about something that's not always easy to talk about because I hope it helped you, but I know it'll also help people
Yeah.
listening.
Yes. Well, it's funny. My husband was like, "Oh, you're going to be on a podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're probably not going to want to listen to the episode."
I don't have a lot of men that listen to it anyway, so it's okay.
I didn't think, I mean, he's probably going to want to just because it's me, but I was like, I am probably going to talk about you. Then this will be nice for him to hear it
Yeah.
from you
Mhm.
as opposed to from me.
Yes. Yep. And like you just said, that outside perspective is sometimes all we
Hmm.
need. Even if I'm saying similar things to what you are, sometimes just the fact that it comes from someone else makes us more willing. So
Yeah,
if you're
absolutely.
listening, hi.
Welcome back to another segment of Not Worth Your Money, where Carly and I will talk about something that may or may not be worth forking over the cash for. So today's topic is advice from personal finance creators. Is that worth paying attention to or paying for?
I feel like I am biased.
Yeah.
Okay, here is my 2 cents. I don't think any personal finance advisor or content creator has knowledge that is not available for free. However, what they can offer is outside perspective, which is able to think through options for achieving goals in a more efficient and more effective way than someone who's emotionally attached to a scenario. And then I also think that accountability and including someone else in the frustrations that you feel can alleviate the stress and fear by just allowing someone else who exists outside of your brain to know what's going on. And like a similar thing to talking to a therapist or a counselor is that they have solutions that can help you, but in of itself talking to them can be a solution of saying what you're frustrated about, saying what you fear can start to alleviate yourself of overinflating the situation. So as a personal finance creator and expert or assistant, whatever you want to call it, to me, what I'm offering is the ability to look at your highly emotional, frustrating scenario with a completely black and white objective set of eyes. Like I can look at your long list of debts that says that you owe your parents and you have a second mortgage on your house and you have 4 student loans and all of that. And I can just add it all up as a number and just say, okay, that's what the debt is. Now let's work out a plan to save up an emergency fund and to start paying off those debts. And this is the order that I would put them in, where for the person who's in that, they're thinking, oh my gosh, I owe my parents. I'm always going to owe my parents every time I'm getting together with them. Even if they don't say anything, I think that in the back of their mind, they're thinking about how I owe them. And all of that is very counterproductive to problem solving. And so I think if you're stuck in that mode of it's never going to get better, there's nothing that can help me. And if you think about the thought process that you are taking with your money and it's highly emotional or very extreme, so it's always going to be this way, I'm never going to change, then adding someone else to the conversation can be the missing piece in finding a path forward.
There are obviously a lot of personal finance creators out there. We've had a lot of them on this podcast. You've talked to a lot of them. I know you interact with even more through social media and other things. Not name dropping people, but what are some of the things that you look for when you like collaborate with people? Like, what are some of the positives that you're like, yes, this person, even though we have a different approach, this person gets it?
That they appreciate gray areas, so that there is a wide range of ways to arrive at a common solution or to solve a problem. So on the flip side of that, a red flag for me is this is the way to get out of debt or invest. And if you don't do this way, you're never going to make it, or you're stupid or whatever. If there's like a very black and white, this is a yes and this is a no, and anybody who doesn't do the way that I'm recommending is not doing the right thing. So the people that I appreciate and that I want to surround myself with and that I want to talk about finances with are the ones who have a very open perspective on, they clearly know what they think is a wise path forward, and they also appreciate hearing perspectives that are counteractive to what they believe, because they know that that stretches themselves and helps them to develop a better understanding of the problems. So I follow people who have advice that I would say is probably different and sometimes even opposite than myself. But the fact that we can have DM exchanges about appreciating a viewpoint different than ours, that is a green flag to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you about, because I mean, a lot of these I will do a quick Google search about 10 seconds before we start recording and try to come up with some topics or things to talk about. I just thought it would be interesting to hear your perspective, your meta thought about what you're doing and how you interact with other people, because I think you would agree, like you just said, you, Carly, Debt Free Mom, do not have the definitive answer for personal finance, because nobody does.
Yeah.
And so participating in that conversation with multiple voices, you get to learn the wisdom and you get to learn from the mistakes of multiple people at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like back in high school when we were learning how to write research papers. We took a class called American Studies where we were learning how to like curate sources that were reliable and put them together into something. And we were always told the more sources, the better. The more primary, the more closer to the situation, the better, and the more, the better. And I think that is the same way with anything that you would want to be able to think critically about. If you have one direct fire hose of information and you don't have a variety, then your opinions you form or the action you choose to take is going to be very one-dimensional. So I hope that people are not only following me for money. That's a lot on my plate, but it's also not going to give the full picture. Whatever situation they're in is going to need a little bit from me and a little bit from Jesse Fioran and a little bit from Lydia Sen and even a little bit from Dave Ramsey, like a little, all of those things to piece together into what works best for them. And so when people are looking for advice or sources on what to do, I would say that don't underemphasize quality, but make sure you emphasize quantity, that if you're trying to figure out what order to pay your debts off in, that you just quickly scan through 7 or 8 different people's thoughts on that. And then you can call a wise path forward for yourself, taking little bits from all of those, as opposed to finding one and then saying, I'm going to do it exactly the same way that they do it and not deviate at all. And then be surprised when it doesn't work for you because you're a different person.
Absolutely. Yeah. We love hearing from other personal finance creators too. And like I said, we've had several on the podcast. If you know anybody that you think would be a good guest for the show that you'd like Carly to hash it out with, have a friendly conversation with, let us know. Email carly@debtfreemom.co or send Instagram DM and we'll hook it up. We'll make it happen.
I like talking to people who think and believe things that are different than me because it stretches my thinking. I like to think along those lines. And I like to have people push back on what the assumptions I have are, because I'm either going to clarify the position I'm currently in, and so I'll come out having an even better picture of what I already thought, or I will have improved my thinking on something. And so both of those are a win.
Yeah, I think you enjoyed that. And if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to guess that you also like that approach to life too. So let us know who you'd like us to have on the show, and we'll make it happen.
Yep.
This has been the Debt Free Mom Podcast, Not Worth Your Money, with Kyle and Carly, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Debt Free Mom Podcast. If you want to join me as a guest on the show, go to dfmpodcast.com. The Debt Free Mom Podcast is hosted by me, Carly Hill, and is produced, edited, and mixed by Kyle Hill. Music for this episode was written by Kyle Hill. Hit subscribe wherever you're listening to join in with every new episode as we grow our confidence and contentment in our personal finances.